One person might do one test and come up with some kind of diagnosis, and another person does it and says, oh no, that it's something else. So I kind of wanted to keep track of all those elements and make sure that we're all scoring the same way. How do we make sure everybody's playing fairly, basically?
Hey, Smart Chiropractors. Welcome to the Smart Chiropractor Show and our featured guest segment. My name is Dr. Jeff Langmaid. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Jason Deitch. And today we have a chiropractor who many may know from online, but if you don't, he is a sports chiropractor, an entrepreneur, and somebody that we wanted to understand a little bit more about what he's bringing to market, Dr. Doug Maxeiner of ExamXoom. Thank you for coming on and chatting with us today.
Hey, thanks a lot. Happy to be here. This will be fun.
It is our pleasure. And before we get into what you're up to today and where you're going tomorrow, I'd love to trace it back a little bit. I know that you are heavily invested, I'm gonna say, in the sports chiropractic world. You can correct me if I'm wrong. What got you interested initially in either chiropractic or sports chiropractic as you're coming up and making decisions about what you wanted to do with your life?
So it's kind of my second career. I was a broadcast engineer initially, got my undergrad in engineering physics. So definitely wear a nerd hat at times. I was doing some martial arts at the time and was really interested always in kind of the natural approach to health. And chiropractic seemed like that, check the boxes there. So I went to chiropractic school, left my job in radio, and kind of just gravitated towards the more mechanistic aspect of chiropractic.
And you've now taken that, you say the mechanistic aspect, you've now taken that into ExamXoom. I guess it's an online software. Before I butcher it all, why don't you lay out, what is it exactly?
Yeah, so I've kind of taken a little step away from active practice with chiropractic and devoted myself to family and to finishing up this software and trying to present that to people. And what I'm trying to do with that is to take and have a quantitative value associated with all the different things that we do in medicine. So when we ask questions or we do tests, we're getting pieces of information from that. And I kind of tally all that and keep track of that and try to present a good analysis of what we found.
Gotcha. And what's the pain point? Let's drill into it because I'd love to know the specifics and get docs to have clarity as far as how does this implement in their practice. But before we get to how they implement, what were the pain points? What were you struggling with? I know Jason and I can speak to this. Nearly everything that we've developed has been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this doesn't exist, or what's available just isn't what we want to use. And then, we end up creating something on our own. I'm imagining you had a similar path here. What were some of those struggles and pain points that led you to say, man, this is something so not only other chiropractors could use, but I could use personally?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to those crazy conversations we have online with people, debating different viewpoints. And so how valid is somebody's viewpoint on something? When we do a test on somebody, what are we learning from that test? And then how do we incorporate that information into our analysis or into our assessment or our diagnosis? And, one person might do one test and come up with some kind of analysis or diagnosis, and another person does it and says, oh no, it's something else. So I kind of wanted to keep track of all those elements and make sure that we're all scoring the same way. It's a way of keeping score from our history and our exam and even our treatments. So how do we keep score, and how do we make sure everybody's playing fairly, basically? And that can include, playing fairly with other doctors, but also when you're presenting your records to third-party payers, and they're like, hey, why are you doing this? Well, here's why I'm doing this. There's clear evidence that that's happening. And I wanted to make it in a graphical format so that it was real easy for even a layman to understand.
So let's keep digging deeper on that, I guess. What specifically are you measuring? How is a doctor implementing the tool? Is it practical to implement, or is this now a science project they have to now take on, after hours, or how does this all work?
Yes. So number one complaint from just about everybody is note-taking, charting. Everybody hates it. It takes way too much time for everybody. I would agree with that. So I'm going to try not to lose track of your question. So I apologize if I get off too far. But basically, I had to have an easy way where we could, make it easy for the doctor, the clinician, to add in their data and perform an analysis. And I think the way I did that was just basically it's checkboxes. So did they pass or did they fail? Or there's some other things we can measure with that. But basically a test pass or a test fails. And so it's really just checkboxes. So hopefully it's not some weird, science experiment on the user experience. Now on the back end, it's a science experiment. So I've tried to do all the hard work. All the doctor has to do is check boxes. It's just radio buttons, if you're familiar with that. In the background, I am performing multiple calculations, and my approach to it is a little bit different. And this is where we get a little technical. And I welcome questions. Anybody wants to shoot me questions or challenge me, I'd love to hear from you. But basically, what I'm doing is taking a systems medicine approach. And so as chiropractors, or most people listening to this show, I think probably take a systems approach. They're looking not just at individual components, but they're looking at the big picture on the patient. So I start with that. I look at the different regions of the body. So what regions are involved in a particular test? I'm just going to use tests, but it applies to questions, and it applies to treatments, and it applies to diagnosis. If we take a particular test, we're looking at a region or regions of the body. And so when I do an overhead squat, I'm looking at the shoulder, I'm looking at the thoracic spine, I'm looking at the lumbar spine, the pelvis, the hips, the knees, the ankles, the feet. That's a lot of regions. So somebody can't do an overhead squat, and they're like, oh, well, what's wrong with them? It could be any number of things. So we're looking at a lot of regions. There's a lot there. Then what we also do is we look at each system within each region. So the circulatory system, digestive system, the endocrine system, nervous system, muscular system, skeletal system, blah, blah, blah. We're looking at each of the systems. We can also dig down deeper, and we can look at the structures, the components of that system. So the organs, the tissues within there. And we can even drill down into greater and greater detail. We can appreciate aspects that go down to the cellular and even the metabolic level. Okay. So we're looking at this large chain of things. So what's going on in the background is assigning numbers to those values. What's happening on the doctor end? Pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail. Did that answer your question? I got a little,
yeah, I think so. And then is the goal then that you present the data to the patient in order for patient compliance and retention, or to another doctor if they referred in order to justify care and communicate back to a third-party payer in order to say, here's why you should pay me?
I think my goal is that all of those everybody understands it. What from the doctor doing the exam, that they understand exactly what their results mean, what they mean, and how they interpret it. It's for an additional treating doctor to understand what you've looked at. So if you're a chiropractor and you send that report to the primary physician, they can understand that, oh, well, in their findings, I see that there might be some physiologic deficits within the circulatory system. So maybe I need to investigate that a little bit further. And also, as you mentioned, for payers, so we can help payers understand, what we're doing and why, the validity behind the treatments we've chosen. Now, the other side of that coin is that and insurance companies could also use the software and say, hey, you didn't thoroughly evaluate this system. I don't know that we're going to pay for this particular treatment because you have not provided any evidence that that's in deficit. So there's a place for, like I said, leveling the playing field so that we understand what was evaluated easily, and then what the treatment is and whether or not that's validated based on what the findings are so far.
Gotcha. And how do you connect those dots? You mentioned that the doc is doing basically pass fail for many of what they're inputting. There's calculations on the back end. What's then the output? Is it graphical? I know we talked about trying to hopefully get an overlay here so docs can see it, but if you could describe it, is there some sort of quotient type number? How does the output impact how the doctor can communicate to the patient or to that referring provider?
The simple answer is I use graphs. So if there's we can take a picture of the body and I highlight it with red and green dots, red and green circles. A bigger circle means that more has been evaluated of that area. A smaller circle means less has been evaluated. So if we do a cervical exam, we're going to have a big, green and red dot on the neck. So that's one way we look at it. We also can break it down into further detail. So each system of the body, we have system graphs, and so we show the probability that system is involved. So maybe with the circulatory system, we've got a 25% probability that there's a problem in the circulatory system. Okay, and we also display on there a weighting of basically how much data we have to support that. So if I have a very high rating, a very high level of weighting, then I know I've done a lot of tests looking at that, and then it gives me my relative probability to that area being a problem. So that's the two easy graphical formats, and you can really quickly look and see if somebody's got a big red dot on their neck. It's like, oh, there's a problem in the neck. But if somebody comes in with a shoulder complaint, and we see that they've got green dots, a big green dot on their shoulder and a red dot basically on their neck. Yes, they have shoulder pain, but we can show that, boy, everything's pointing to the neck, not the shoulder, as being the issue. So the patient can really quickly understand, like, oh, that's why they're working on my neck, because my shoulder hurts. Or conversely, if we see somebody comes in with a shoulder pain and we've got a green dot on the shoulder and no dot on the neck, it's like, hey, you missed something. Go back and check that out. So that's the graphical formatting. And then we also break that down into more and more detail so we can see probabilities everywhere along the chain if we've looked at them. If it's not there, we didn't look at it, but we can see the muscular system, which muscles were functioning and not functioning, or how they tested. And even the things like the extensibility or the strength, the contractile forces of the muscles. So that's in a tabular table format. But I tried to make it real quick so you can look and say, oh, they've got a problem with their lower back.
After they've done all the tests and so on. But Doug, I guess, help me understand who's your ideal client for this? Is this a practitioner who's not very certain about their ability to diagnose? Is it somebody who's wants a sort of a third party validated, here's the evidence for why you need the care or why you should pay? Or who's the ideal client to use this?
That is a great question. I think every entrepreneur gets pounded on that one. So that's one you got to know right away. And I have multiple answers to that. So that's bad. But my ideal person, the first people I need using this software are just regular docs, small practice docs that want to share that information with a patient. I think that's probably the best first use case scenario for this. The goal is everybody uses it all the time. Every clinical encounter should be measured and integrated into this approach, though. So there's a place for it, like I said, for educating patients, educating doctors. The trick with educating doctors is everybody's already doing a great job and they don't need any help, and they already nail absolutely everything. The data does not support that. Okay. So you guys are great doctors. You don't need it, right? But the guy down the street, he could probably use a little help with the diagnosis. And in some cases, you're that guy down the street. So there's a place for everything. I of course, am a great doctor, and I don't need it at all. And I let my arrogance get in the way, and I ignore some of the things it tells me, and I'm flipping wrong some of the times. I'm sorry, watch language. But yeah, so I find myself, as great of a clinician as I am, there's some things where I leave a gap. I don't look at something, and that comes back to bite me. And so I'm the guy who needs it, the guy who's confident in my diagnosis, and I do a great job communicating. But I think there's room for that to expand. So I don't know if that was a good answer or a cop out, but and honestly, if I could take a second and just tell you what my goal is, my super moment is, it's like, this should be used before anybody gets a prescription filled. Look, have their history in there and understand the findings that patient has. And then, is that medication going to address those issues, or is it going to tip some other thing over the edge? Like, oh, well, they've got a vascular or circulatory issue where they have a bleeding disorder, and now we give them, something that increases their bleeding capability, and now that's going to cause a major problem. So the goal is that every clinical encounter, chiropractic, lab work, imaging, genetic studies can all be run through the system.
Big vision. I like it. Never hurts to have a big vision.
It's painfully big. And I think it's laughably big, because many people I've told this, many people have told me it's too big. It's too big to conquer. I mean, it's changing medicine, and it's changing it on a different level too. And we can get to that if we've got time, but it really, in my mind, should be revolutionary, just in the way we approach things. It doesn't have to be using my software, but just the approach to things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a two-parter for you right now. One is technically to the software. Two is a little bit more about you. First question: does this replace something that the doc is already using, or is this a complement to most of their existing software? And then second question, total pivot: what got you interested in getting into the software game? That's a big lift.
Yes. Yeah. First, is this complementary, or is it filling a gap they don't have? I tried to make it fill a gap that they don't have. I mean, we don't have there's clinical decision support tools out there. Some are good, some are bad. Most are not addressed for what physical medicine people do, I think. So I tried to make it something that clinicians would use in addition to what they're already doing. No, as a non-starter. Like, you mean I got to do extra clicks? No, nobody's doing extra clicks. So I tried to integrate it. I had to build my own EHR around it to make it easy to use. There are things that, you could, try and place it in other systems. There's various protocols you can use to get into different EHRs and things like that. But I think to kind of get running, it had to be replacing an EHR. So basically, you're using it like an EHR. It works just like an EHR, except you got these extra, you just push the buttons and all the data goes in magically. So there's that. That maybe segues into the other question about the software. How do I get into software? And so it kind of goes back to my engineering background. Technically, I think the last real computer science class I took was Fortran. You guys may be too young to remember Fortran, but that was a long time ago. I did another project. I did a couple little projects with engineering-y things, and I had to teach myself how to program microcontrollers. And so that was kind of a C-based thing, C language. And then I decided to make this software. And it was actually, I got tired of waiting for the SFMA software to come out. This was a few years ago, more than a few years ago. I said, I'll just write it myself. And in building that, in trying to do that, I wanted a way to be able to adapt and change, because nothing should be, no algorithm should be, stuck forever. So it's like, when they change that test, how do I account for that? And that folded into this, systems medicine thinking. So, yeah, self-taught, pretty much. I've done 95% of the programming on my site. So I know that. Also, yeah, that's kind of where that came from. But that's why it's taking a little longer to turn out. Is getting all the features in there.
That's all good. And Doug, I know we're going to be up against the clock here. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we wrap, I want to make sure docs out there know where to go to learn more. So I'll kick it over to you. Where can they go to learn more about what you're up to and plug into the system so that they can use a systems approach, so that they can have really the graphs that you described? They can have that added level of support, whether they're speaking to a patient, whether they're speaking to a clinician, or they're speaking to a payer. I think it's fantastic. Where can docs learn more?
ExamXoom.net, ExamXoom.net. You can see some sample reports on there. You can sign up for an account and play around with it a little bit and see what's going on. You can also, if you want, you can call me, 314-324-2645. Email Dr. Doug M, drdougm @gmail.com. I want you to reach out to me. You can hit me up on Facebook, whatever. The thing I need, if I can do an ask,
Please.
I need some people to beta test the site. So I need a few users, small volume users. This is great if you're a student starting out. If you've got a office practice you do, but you're kind of starting some side stuff, if you low volume stuff. I think there's a few little bumps to get, but man, I got a lot of features already that I think you'll find really helpful. But I want to fine tune and see what the docs need. What do the people need that are doing things? I know what I need. Might be different. Somebody's going to have a great idea, like, wow, we need to have this. So I would love about 5 docs to get in and do some beta testing. So please reach out and help me with that, and we'll give you a nice system to use.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I appreciate that call to action at the end, because it's a wonderful offer. It's a great opportunity for those smaller practices, those younger docs, to get out there. Doug, keep up the great work. I love the entrepreneurial spirit, and we love highlighting docs that are taking action and doing cool stuff in the space. So we'll drop all those links down below if you're listening or watching. On behalf of Jason and our entire team, Doug, thanks for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thanks a lot. Had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for watching this video on the Smart Chiropractor. To not miss a single thing that's clinically oriented, marketing oriented, or more, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel today.